on this particular day. This is Mark Lee, and of course, I'm over here today at the Hayti Heritage Center. And of course, we've got all kinds of amazing things happening here. We've got the symphony playing, and they'll be doing a show on tomorrow. That's right, they've got a show on tomorrow afternoon, and it should be a great show with our Durham Symphony. But one of the things we do on the Pod TV, in addition to playing some amazing concerts and some amazing interviews, is we love having conversations with amazing people that are doing amazing things. And I've got a special guest that'll be appearing today. I was actually yesterday visiting with two friends of mine, and we were talking about some iconic brands. We were talking about things like Bojangles, which of course is based right here in North Carolina. And we were also talking about the story behind Ray Kroc and the McDonald's brothers, which can be quite a fascinating story. And who knows, maybe Leslie's got some thoughts on that as well. And then we were having a conversation about Wendy's, and of course the story around Wendy's and that name, which was of course Dave Thomas's daughter, and all in that space. And then we were also thinking about KFC, and people sometimes forget that Hardee's is a North Carolina brand. And of course, a lot of people do know that RJR or RJR Nabisco is a North Carolina brand. And I was actually having some conversation with some friends of mine, and we were talking about how the cigarette industry had used some of the tactics from the cigarette and tobacco industry when they went into the candy and confectionery industry. So they were using some of those same kind of iconic brand kind of strategies along those lines. So definitely going to bring in Leslie Griggs. He's done a lot of work around some iconic brands that are out there, but that's just a little bit was on my mind. But I wanted to bring on Leslie, and he can share a little bit about what he's got going on in that space. So how are you doing, Leslie? It was interesting. I was hanging out, like I said yesterday, with two friends of mine. We actually are part of an iconic brand. We do something with the Apollo Theater, and we do an event called The Road to the Apollo. So we got a contract with that world famous theater, and me and Captain Newborn, who is the creator of The Road to the Apollo, will get together and talk about veterans' rights, because he's also using it as a avenue to talk about veterans issues and all along those lines. But he did negotiate with the Apollo that we could use their name. So we used the whole Apollo model. So we have the log like they have if you go to the New York Apollo. We've got our own version of the Sandman. We've got our rotating Kiki Shepherds and a number of other things in that space. And then we have our own house band. And then I wind up playing somewhat of the Sinbad role by doing some of the introduction of the performers and trying to take a little bit of their history and all along those lines, the performers, and get to know them and maybe tell a little joke here and there. I am nowhere near the comedian of my good friend Ronnie Warner, who is an actual comedian, but I might tell a little joke here or there just to keep the audience pumped up. And then, of course, as the captain likes to say, I am the hype man, which means that we have to do that whole thing about getting the crowd pumped up and motivated and all along those lines. So that is part of my job in that activity, is to hype up the crowd, because, you know, if you follow the Apollo, there's that whole if you boo them, then the Sandman has to come and get them off the stage and all along those lines. And apparently the Apollo has a recent rule over the last several years that you're not supposed to boo the kids, because we want to encourage the kids and not have that damage to their ego. So they started instituting that rule, and we have a similar rule. So we tried not to step on the kids' ego and all of that. And we tell the audience that if they boo the kids, we might come and get them, because we don't want the kids to be discouraged. We want them to be encouraged no matter what their talent level is, and we don't want to mess with their psyche. But Leslie, when I heard that you were doing research in iconic brands, I was like, this is a man I got to talk to, because even growing up, I remember being a fan of Tony the Tiger, and definitely being a fan of a number of the other iconic brands out there, even, definitely some of the other iconic Disney brands. Of course, was a fan of Woody Woodpecker and even Pepe Le Pew, and definitely some other iconic brands, even in terms of commercial brands. So how did you get involved in this work? And definitely if you can share some of your stories about some of the things that you are doing.
Okay. I was born in 1952, a year before the tater tot was invented.
Okay.
So my great uncle,
Mm-hmm.
Nephi and his brother Golden, they're brothers.
Right.
They were in the corn business in the late mid 40s, and they lived in Ontario, Oregon. Nephi and Golden were both born in Nampa. I think Golden was in Nampa. My grandfather was the elder brother. His name is Wells.
Mm-hmm.
And Nephi and Golden decided they wanted to get into the produce business, so they founded a company, and they went out at midnight and picked the sweet corn. And by picking the sweet corn at midnight and in the early morning of the hours, then putting it on ice, preserved the value of the taste. And so they would then, about 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning, they would be out delivering sweet corn to the corn farmers, selling their corn to the corn farmers. They became so successful at this that they were one of the largest frozen corn distributors in the Northwest. They were distributing corn from Ontario, Oregon, all the way to Northern California, and all the way up to Seattle, and all the way over to Montana.
Wow.
The problem with the corn business was it was only a 2 months of the year production, so they needed another product to give them a year-round income, and so they decided to get into the frozen French fry business.
Uh-huh.
So they bought a bankrupt plant in Bridgeford,
Okay.
a plant from the Bridgeford Company in Ontario, Oregon, and then they built the equipment that they needed to begin making frozen French fries.
Oh, well. Well, I know those tater tots are very popular. I have some friends that love those tater tots. I still get some tater tots myself sometimes as well. So they are very much delicious. But, some folks like them even better than they like those French fries. And, of course, you cannot go wrong with putting some Heinz on a tater tot or whatever your ketchup of choice is, and all along those lines. And I do know that the tater tot company was eventually sold to Heinz, and definitely looks like y'all had a pretty good return on investment in that space and everything. But, I know that the name a lot of times catches people, Ore-Ida, and definitely I'm familiar with that brand name. But how did they even come up with the name Ore-Ida and all in along those lines?
Well, they wanted a company that represented, because they both had Ontario, Oregon's about 10 miles from the Idaho border.
Uh-huh.
And so the border town, they had contacts or relationships in Idaho, and a lot of potatoes came from Idaho, and Oregon was where the plant was built, so they just thought they'd connect them together. So that's how the name was created. And so as they got into the French fry business, frozen French fry business, they had you block the fries, you cut the potato, and the leftovers that were created from that process were sold to the cows for cattle feed.
Oh, well. I didn't know that.
And my uncle being an enterprising, and Uncle Nephi being an enterprising and a creative guy, and he got to thinking about how can we make this glop more productive. So they did some experimentations, and they created what's called the Holy Board.
Mm-hmm.
The Holy Board is a piece of 3/4 inch plywood, about 11 by 18 inches, has about 31 inch holes drilled into it. And they experimented over time with the size of the hole. It went from 3/4 inch to 1 inch, and they finally settled on 1 inch. So they would take the shavings, they would mix some flour and some spices, and this glop, they would push it through. I guess we're on are we on TV?
Yeah, it's on live stream TV.
Okay,
yes.
Just a second.
Yeah.
I have here a replica of the Holy Board.
Wow. Okay.
So they would take this this board, and they would squeeze the potato glop through the holes,
Mm-hmm.
and then Golden would cut them off on the back, and then they would drop them into a deep fat fryer and fry them up.
Wow. Sounds like that'd be very delicious and everything. One of the questions I had, did you actually follow in the footsteps of your relatives and get into the restaurant and the cooking business yourself? I know you're doing a lot of research and definitely keeping the name out there, but I was wondering whether you followed in their tradition and went into the restaurant space yourself.
No, in 1965, the company was sold to Heinz Corporation,
Right.
and it was a $30 million transaction. Uncle Nephi was on the board of Heinz Corporation until 1969, and then from that point forward, the Grieg name was basically eliminated from any. It was just separated. Let's put it that way. It became our legacy.
Right.
So part of my mission is to come back around at my retirement age. I worked for 45 years as a financial consultant in the financial services industry and retired in April. And I had this big aha moment in February as the Holy Board became available. The Holy Board's been buried in Oregon for the last 70 years, hidden from the public purview.
Oh, wow.
And my cousin Steve and we've been working on this project for the last 3 or 4 years, trying to figure out an angle that we could get the Holy Board brought into the public venue. And that has just started to break loose here over the last year. One of the catalysts. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know that one of the things that you've been doing is also finding some of the history, and there is a famous hotel in Miami, the Fontainebleau, and I do know that I want to say that it is still around, and I know Miami definitely has some growth in a lot of areas. It is definitely one of the great tourist spots that are all in that way. It's been a minute, but I used to go down there regularly for a film festival, and I'm due for another trip down that area. But I was just wondering, is that something that you've been thinking about? Is maybe even doing some kind of like tour dates of some of the places that Ore-Ida and the brand were famous for and had a history as? Because I know that y'all made the debut of the Tater Tots at that time newly constructed Fontainebleau Hotel, and I think the hotel may still be around. I'm not 100%
I don't know. I haven't checked that out. But so in 1954, there was a National Food Distributors Convention going on. And Nephi and Golden, they packed up 15 pounds of tater tots, put them on ice, got themselves uninvited and unawares to the Fontainebleau. My Uncle Nephi worked his way into the back of the restaurant, gave the chief chef $100 bill if he would fry these tater tots up and put some on a plate, on everybody's plate on the table, as kind of something to grab their attention. And so they did that. They followed through, and everybody loved the tater tot. That was its first big, you might say, grand opening in terms of something, and that kind of launched the national sales project of the tater tot. 1959, they needed a new plant, and Michigan's got Michigan's got a role to play here. So I want to set that up and tell you how Michigan played a role in the tater tot history.
Yeah, please do. And I know that I went to school in Milwaukee, so I definitely know a little bit of the history of the Midwest, but I don't know enough of the history of the tater tot and Michigan. Because like I said, a lot of people get Marquette confused with Marquette, Michigan, but there is a town called Marquette, Michigan, and then the university that I went to is actually in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But definitely have friends that were from Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, and a number of those other Midwestern towns. So definitely tell us how the connection to Michigan is with the tater tot.
So the big problem with Oregon was transportation costs and transportation connections. Burley, Idaho is right on the Snake River, and that's the railroad runs right through Burley. So they thought, well, we'll go build a plant in Burley. And so they did that. They got the financing to do that. I believe going public as a corporation. They needed to build a processing plant. And my dad was hired at that time to do the cost accounting on the construction of the plant. That's how we as a family got involved with the Ore-Ida Corporation. I had my first real job in the 4th grade. My mother and I would go out to the plant every day after school. And we would fill the vending machines with food for the cafeteria.
Oh, wow.
So I believe I wrote this down, and it was about 1961 or 62. The big problem again was transportation. They just weren't solving the problem as they needed, and so they ended up going to Greenville, Michigan. They built a plant in Greenville, Michigan, in 1960, 61, 62, in that time frame. And that solved the problem for transportation, but created another problem. The potatoes wouldn't grow in Greenville, Michigan.
Wow.
And so they couldn't get the consistency of the russet potato in Greenville, Michigan. And I don't know exactly what ended up with that plan and how long that lasted. I haven't gotten that detail out, but But that's how Michigan had a role in the history of the tater tot.
Wow, that sounds like a fascinating history. Have you ever thought about getting in touch with some of the state fairs? Because I know that I believe it's September, North Carolina, which has a large state fair, will be definitely having some stuff around agriculture. Agriculture plays a large part in our state fair kind of culture that exists here in North Carolina. And I know a number of other states are very big on state fairs, and definitely a lot of times the food industry plays a large role in the state fair kind of scenario. So I was just wondering if that was something that you had been looking at or not.
Yes, we are looking at that very strongly, and that's a great idea that you've brought up. Closer to home, I'd have to give some study and thought to traveling the country about that, and I'm going to do that. I appreciate that. But one of my thoughts in Idaho produces a third of the nation's potato crop.
Right.
And Idaho doesn't really have, I know of one potato festival in a small town in Idaho called Shelley, Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
That's been going on for 20 years, as long as I can remember. But there is no potato festival in Idaho. There is no tater tot festival in Idaho. And part of my mission, I think, is to try to change that in the future. But I'm going to give some serious study to also trying to connect with other states' potato and tater tot festivals, because I think there's a benefit there to trying to bring the Grig name. Now, our real goal is to bring that Grig name back around so that over the next 20 years, tater tots and the Grig name will not remain separated, that they'll reconnect. And I've often thought, I wonder if it was called the Grig tots, if the legacy would have succeeded as much as it has, but we got to deal with what the world gives us. So we're just going to try to reconnect the Grig name with tater tots so that people know that they're connected.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That's got to have that connection between your name and the tater tots. I mentioned those iconic brands earlier, but what are some of the iconic brands that you are big time fans of? And have you done some research on some of the other iconic brands? Because I know a lot of times people will think about iconic brands. I know that even here in North Carolina, we have Cheerwine and we have some other products that are even North Carolina based. Definitely folks will associate North Carolina with Pepsi and some other brands that are out there as well. But I'm just wondering, what are some of the iconic brands that you have been doing research on, and what are your own thoughts about some of the popular iconic brands, and what are some of your favorite iconic brands?
Well, there's the interesting that the 20 this is an issue that's kind of varies depending on what Facebook page or what Google page you read, but I looked up the top 20 iconic foods recently, and in that there's French fries, there's hamburgers, there's tater tots. One gave me a list. One list had Oreo cookies. Another list didn't have Oreo cookies. But in that one list, Oreo cookies and tater tots were the only two of the top 20 iconic foods that were actually patented foods.
Wow.
Everything else was just, generic, like Kleenex or hamburgers or French fries.
Right.
But I want to put a shout out to J.R. Simplot Corporation in terms of the French fry.
Uh-huh.
Because J.R. Simplot Corporation actually invented the frozen French fry.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
And I know that my families wanted to compete with J.R. Simplot back in 1950, 52. And now, because of agreement between Kraft Heinz Corporation, which owns the patent on the tater tots. In fact, the brand name is Tater Tots plural.
Mm-hmm.
Tater tot itself is not a brand name, but Tater Tots plural is the registered trademark.
Wow.
And so Kraft Heinz and Kraft Heinz and J.R. Simplot recently made a deal to allow J.R. Simplot the opportunity to buy the plant in Ontario, Oregon, and to have control of the tater tot production for Ore-Ida Corporation.
Right.
And that's one of the things that has helped us bring the Holy Board into the public at this point in time, and is one of the catalysts for helping me to get started in my passion going forward in bringing our Grig name back into connection with this. And And so anyway, that's a little bit more of the story of my backstory.
No, it sounds great and everything. I know having that name brand can be very much important in everything because, like I said, I'm here in Durham, North Carolina, and a lot of people associate Durham with the Duke family because the Duke family was involved in a number of businesses, not just the university, but there was even Duke Power, which was our power outlet. And of course, there were a number of other things that they were involved in as well, being a very big name in the tobacco industry and all in that space. So how important do you think it is for families in general to kind of maintain their legacy and have that connection to whatever their legacy is? Because I know even in my own family, my grandmother founded one of the minority, actually the first minority library in Raleigh, North Carolina. And then my parents actually started a radio station that was on for about 12 years, which is part of my own media legacy. And there's some other legacy things that I am part of as well. But how important do you think it is for folks in general to have an understanding of their history and their legacy and to try to play on that and to actually try to use that as a part of their life?
I think it's very important. I have felt honored my whole life in being connected with the Tater Tot and the story, and with Tater Tots and their story, and it's just an honor. I guess the Hershey Corporation is kind of my model. I guess they've been able to have the name connected with the brand and done some very good things throughout the world, and they've survived over 100 years to accomplish a lot of good in this country. Yeah. And so, are we running up against the time?
Running up against time, but I did want you to tell folks a little bit more about your research and all of that. I've actually got to open the door, but one of the things that I was wanting to hear from you, and I know you've got to get to your other appointment, but one of the things that I always let folks do is if they can say how you can be reached, how folks can reach you in general, and any message that you would like to give of positivity and hope, then I will maybe have one other question when I get back. But if you can answer those questions real quick, I'll give you the full screen.
We're working on our website. It's not yet complete. You can reach me at llgrigg@gmail.com. It's llgrigg@gmail.com. And my phone number is 208-589-0065. What was the other question? Hello. Well, I guess I'm not sure what's going on here.
Sorry about that.
Mark?
Yep, sorry about that. I had to do something real quick and everything, but I know that you've got to get to your other appointment, but definitely this has been quite fascinating and everything. If you had to name one of your favorite brands and all of that is not a Tater Tot, what would be a favorite iconic brand that you love going to and checking out on a regular basis?
Well, I like a lot of foods. I find it hard to select foods as my favorites because I just love good food. Gosh, I'm stumped. I'm not sure what I can single out on that one.
No problem. That's a good thing to love good food. Like I said, I actually went to a Thai restaurant yesterday, hanging out with a couple of good friends of mine, and that was actually some good Thai food that we were having at a restaurant here in Durham and everything. The thing that I didn't tell you, like I said, I know you've got your other appointment, but the founders of the network, Pod TV, one of them is a pension attorney, and the other one is an engineer by trade, and they oftentimes are disappointed at our education system and the fact that our education system doesn't teach enough about financial literacy. And I would say they probably would say that we don't teach enough of our history as well, including our American history and some of the things that are been created right here in America, like Tater Tots and all along those lines. So I was just wondering your thoughts about that as a last thought before you get on to your next commitment and everything. But how do you think we are doing in the way of teaching our kids and also about finances and about the American entrepreneurship legacy?
there's a lot of people doing a lot of work in that area with helping students to go beyond the classroom in state programs that teach citizenship and the government system. There's a lot of games on the internet for people to have mock participation in the stock market. I think the stock market that's my second passion, the stock market. Like I say, I spent 45 years in that industry, and I'm very blessed that I can go forward now and pursue my first passion, which is my family legacy.
No, that's very good, and you're so right. Have you ever thought, because a friend of mine has this notion, and we have a show called Gamers Den, that you can create a video game about just about anything, and that there is not a topic that you can't have a video game about. So do you think that we can have a Tater Tots video game, and what would that game look like? Because he's up
well,
there.
That's really a good idea. I'll have to study that one out.
Yeah. Because he's definitely of the opinion, Jatovy he actually works with the Durham Bulls, which is another iconic brand and everything, but he is because he does the on the field announcement. So not the play by play, but we have like the running with the bull, which is the Durham Bulls mascot, and some of the other things, like I think they still do sumo wrestling and other kind of contests. And he does the call of those activities, but he also runs the Gamers Den and is very much involved in esports. But he is of the opinion that we definitely can create video games on just about anything. He even showed me a trash video game and some other video games about topics that you might not think would be video game topics. So who knows? Maybe we can have a Tater Tot game. Maybe the little Tater Tots can be running around and they can be the kind of the main characters in
we will give that some serious study. I appreciate the idea.
No problem at all. If you have any last minute comments or things that you would like to just leave with our audience, I'll get ready to let you go on to your next appointment. But this has been a fun conversation. But any last minute thoughts that you would like to share, we would love to hear them.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Bye.
All right. Well, you have a good one. This has been a fun conversation, and we definitely look to hear more about the Tater Tots. I might have to go out and get me some Tater Tots later on today, since lunchtime is not that far around the corner. So we might have to go out and get some Tater Tots later on this evening. But we're going to close out with a poem and a comment about coaching, because coaching is very important. So we've got this performance piece that is about coaching and all along those lines. But that's what we use to close out. And if you've got any things about Tater Tots or about your company that you want to share with Pod TV, if you'll send those to me, I'll be sure that we'll get those up and running as well. So if there's anything you want to share and have running on your company, you do have the opportunity to do that anytime that you would like.
Thank you, Mark. Bye.
Bye. All right. So we're going to close out, like I said, with this one little spot and everything, but it was a fun conversation. But right now, let's learn about coaching.
The difference between thinking and doing and living in the 21st century. They teach us about being a real quarterback-oriented games. We don't have to just use video games and live in the shadows of good things because of them. We grow up with agility far larger and bigger than we are tall. Parents are the champions and have to be our first life coaches and know-it-alls. Who knows how this came to be? Coaches will ask you if you know your right foot from your left, if you know yourself, if you act knowingly good or bad, if you can move and negotiate a field with style and form, if you can tackle or throw a pass, or if your last name is that of a clown. If you can let someone know on the team that you are in trouble before you cause yourself or someone else trouble. If you are ready to learn teamwork or aware that you started out today with your pants down or your sportsmanship was left on the kitchen table. If you know the social studies, the alphabets, science, music, characters, and the stats and the numbers of a great student player eligible to stay on the team. And if you know the poise of great athletic champions and their scientific attitudes that are historical or music to us now, if you have the swag of the game, the discipline, the performance, and artistic form down pat, and if you have the style of gymnastic that the sport has with life, if you have the work ethic and determination to make it all seem easy and not a game at all, if you have the knowledge of all the above, or you don't know things like this even make the difference. I think that when it comes to the importance of parents and their field and self-knowledge, wisdom, virtues, and courage, their teachings, love, respect, care that they illustrate on the field and in the grind of life with their actions and their ideas, experiences, muscle, and strategic magic and skills wrapped around us with their priceless love. For their verbs to be that make us winners in this hard and fast third century that without them, kids and adults, athletes could hardly see or do anything at all. Parents teach us the difference between playing video games and playing on the field. Parents teach us how to be champions. A huge hug should go to parents, coaches, and parent-like community people who have love on the field for you and who are champions for your life, both in and out the games.